The title of Princess Royal is usually granted by the British monarch to their eldest daughter. It was Henrietta Maria of France, consort of King Charles I, who wanted to have a title similar to the Madame Royale title in France. It was their daughter Mary who became the first Princess Royal in 1642. However, the French Madame Royale was often used for the eldest unmarried daughter and could pass to the next daughter when the elder married. The British Princess Royal title is for life and can only be granted again when the holder dies. So far, there have been 7 Princesses Royal. Mary, Princess Royal, and Princess of Orange Mary, was the daughter of King Charles I and Henrietta Maria of France, and she was also the first bearer of the title Princess Royal. Mary was born on 4th November 1631 at St James's Palace as the eldest of 9 children. King Charles I wanted Mary to marry one of the sons of King Felipe, the 4th of Spain, or her first cousin Karl Ludwig, Elector Palatine, but both marriage prospects failed. Instead, Mary was betrothed to Willem, hereditary Prince of Orange, son of Frederick Hendrik, Prince of Orange, and Amalia of Solms-Braunfels. On May 2nd in 1641, at the Chapel Royal of the Palace of Whitehall, 9-year-old Mary married William, who would have his 15th birthday in a couple of weeks. Because of Mary's young age, the marriage was not consummated for several years. In 1650, Mary was pregnant with her first child when her husband William fell ill with smallpox. He died on November 6, 1650, at the age of 24. 8 days later, on November 14, 1650, Mary gave birth to her only child, William. Mary's fatherless son, William, was the sovereign Prince of Orange from birth. His 19-year-old widowed mother wanted to name her son Charles after her brother, King Charles II of England. But her mother-in-law insisted that her grandson be named William Henry, in Dutch Willem Hendrik, and she got her way. During William's minority as Prince of Orange, his mother had to share his guardianship with his paternal grandmother, Amalia of Solms-Braunfels, and Friedrich Wilhelm, Elector of Brandenburg, whose wife, Louise Henriette of Nassau, was the elder sister of William's father. In 1658, Mary became the sole regent of the Principality of Orange, but was opposed by the mayor. Her first cousin king, Louis XIV of France, came to her aid militarily so she could consolidate her position. On December 20th, 1660, Mary fell ill with smallpox, and by the next day, she was dangerously ill. Mary died on December 24th, 1660, at the Palace of Whitehall in London, England, at the age of 29. She was buried in Henry VII Chapel at Westminster Abbey in London, England. Her son William was just 10 years old and had lost both parents to smallpox. Anne, Princess Royal, and Princess of Orange Anne, was born on 2nd November 1709 as the daughter of King George II of Great Britain and Caroline of Ansbach. On 30th August 1727, George II created his eldest daughter Princess Royal, as the title had remained unused since 1660. In 1734, Princess Anne married the Prince of Orange, William IV, and used the title Princess of Orange instead of Princess Royal. The marriage won wide political acceptance in both Great Britain and the Netherlands. Anne apparently expected to remain in Britain, but after a month of marriage, William and Anne left for the Netherlands. She was always treated with some suspicion by the Dutch citizenry. When Anne first became pregnant, she wanted to have the child in London, considering the possible position of the child in the royal succession. But William and his advisers wanted the child born the Netherlands, and her parents supported his wishes. The pregnancy turned out to be false. She had 2 miscarriages and 2 stillbirths before she was pregnant again with her daughter Carolina, born in 1743. Her brother had finally married and her mother had died, so there was little question but that the child would be born at the Hague. Another daughter, Anna, born in 1746, died a few weeks after birth. Anne's son William was born in 1748. When William died in 1751, Anne became regent for their son, William V, since both children were underage. The power of the ruler had declined under her husband and continued to decline under Anne's regency. When a French invasion of Britain was expected, she stood for neutrality of the Dutch, which alienated her British support. She continued as regent until her death in 1759 of dropsy. Her mother-in-law became Princess Regent from 1759 until she died in 1765. Anne's daughter Carolina then became regent until 1766, when her brother turned 18. Charlotte, Princess Royal, and Queen of Wurtemberg. Charlotte was born on 29 September 1766 as the daughter of King George III of the United Kingdom and Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. On 22 June 1789, she was created Princess Royal by her father. She was an intelligent and studious child, and though her looks were compared unfavourably to her pretty younger sisters, Charlotte refused to be cowed and set her mind to the future. Keen to be married, she found the field of possible husbands massively reduced by her father's decision that she would not marry into a Catholic family under any circumstances. However, the suitor most favoured by Charlotte was not only the son of a Catholic, he was also a man with scandal in his past. The hereditary Prince Frederick of Wurtemberg was a widower and father of 3, who had been accused of violence by his late wife, Duchess Augusta of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel, who had fled her husband and taken refuge in Russia. Charlotte's cousin, Augusta, was also the sister to Caroline of Brunswick, later estranged wife of Charlotte's brother, George. Mindful of these allegations as well as his Catholic ties, the King and Queen refused permission for the marriage to go ahead, but Charlotte would not back down and petitioned tirelessly, eventually winning the blessing of her father. The wedding took place on 18th of May 1797 at the Chapel Royal of St. James's Palace, with celebrations going on for days, and the newlyweds set off for their new home in Stuttgart the following month. Despite Frederick's fearsome reputation, he and Charlotte appear to have enjoyed a peaceful marriage. Though their only child was stillborn on 27th April 1798, Charlotte's stepchildren adored her, and she was devoted to them in turn. The settled life of the Stuttgart court was to suffer a serious shake-up in 1800 when French troops marched into Wurtemberg and sent the Duke and Duchess fleeing to Vienna. To the horror of Charlotte's parents, Frederick allied with Napoleon, making territorial exchanges and taking the title Elector of Wurtemberg on 25th of February 1803. He later provided troops to France, and on 1st January the Elector and Electress became King and Queen after a coronation held in Stuttgart, ruling from their home at the Ludwigsburg Palace. Although Frederick switched sides in 1813, Charlotte's parents must have found it hard to reconcile the behaviour of their daughter and son-in-law, and George flatly refused to address her as Queen of Wurtemberg, even after the title was confirmed by the Congress of Vienna. Frederick died in 1816, and the Dowager Queen remained at the palace they had shared, receiving noble visitors from across Europe, including her own illustrious siblings. 30 years after she left England in 1797, she returned to her native land to undergo surgery for dropsy, returning to Germany to convalesce. Dowager Queen Charlotte died at home in 1828, having lived an eventful life, a long way from the shy little girl who had been born in Buckingham House. Victoria, Princess Royal, and German Empress, Victoria Adelaide. Mary Louisa was born at Buckingham Palace on 21st November 1840 and was the eldest child of Queen Victoria and Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. The Queen bestowed the title of Princess Royal on Vicky in 1841, her formal rank until her marriage in 1858 when she became Princess Friedrich Wilhelm of Prussia. In 1851, Vicky was introduced to her future husband, Friedrich Wilhelm of Prussia, when his family accepted an invitation to visit the Great Exhibition in London. The two families were close allies and had maintained contact with each other after the Prussians had sheltered at the British court for 3 months during a revolution in Berlin in 1848. Keen for their families to be united, Victoria and Albert were delighted when Vicky began to form an attachment to Friedrich, despite the 10-year difference in their ages. As well as developing a close relationship with Vicky, Friedrich enjoyed his conversations with Prince Albert, who shared his more liberal views. Although it wasn't unreasonable to expect the couple's wedding to take place in Berlin, since Friedrich was an heir to the Prussian throne, Queen Victoria felt otherwise, and the marriage took place at the Chapel Royal of St. James's Palace in London on 25 January 1858. Furthermore, Prince Albert's announcement that his daughter would retain her title of Princess Royal did not please the Prussian court, and it caused a wave of anti-English resentment. Vicky was already an unpopular figure before she had even arrived. On 27 January 1859, Vicky gave birth to her first child, Wilhelm, but it had been a difficult breech birth which had left the boy with a neurological weakness in his arm. A delay in medical care had placed both mother and child in grave danger, as did the reluctance of the doctors to examine the princess, who was only wearing a flannel nightgown, so they failed to detect the baby was lying breech. The doctors assured Vicky and Friedrich the child would make a full recovery. However, when it became clear there was no improvement, Vicky was forced to inform her parents. Much to Vicky's relief, the birth of her second child, Charlotte, was a much easier affair, but this child would also cause her parents a great deal of heartache as she was suffering from porphyria. Vicky was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1899 and died at Castle Friedrichshof on 5 August 1901, just a few months after the death of her mother, Louise, Princess Royal and Duchess of Fife. Born at Marlborough House on 20th February 1867, Princess Louise entered the world surrounded by fear over her mother's life. Princess Alexandra, daughter of King Christian IX of Denmark, had fallen ill with rheumatic fever towards the end of her pregnancy. Her pain and symptoms were so severe that she was at high risk of passing away, even after the birth of her daughter. Thankfully, she soon made a full recovery, besides developing a permanent limp. 3 months after the traumatic event, on 10th May, the baby was baptised at Marlborough House. Growing up at Sandringham House in Norfolk, Princess Louise maintained a close relationship with her parents and 4 surviving siblings. Toots, as she was known by her family, and her 2 sisters, received a minimal home education that mainly focused on music and art. Together, the 3 sisters were known for their shy and reserved personalities, which caused them to dislike being the centre of attention. Their confidence wasn't helped by their overbearing mother, who insisted on keeping her daughters as children as long as she could. For example, Princess Louise had a children's party to celebrate her 19th birthday. Alexandra was also possessive over her daughters and saw no reason for them to marry, instead wanting them to remain as her permanent companions. Luckily for Louise, she was able to escape her mother's grip on 27th July 1889, when she married her 3rd cousin, Alexander Duff, 6th Earl of Fife, in the private chapel at Buckingham Palace. Following in the footsteps of her namesake, Princess Louise became the 2nd member, Queen Victoria's family, to marry a commoner. 2 days after the ceremony, Queen Victoria upgraded Alexander from Earl to Duke of Fife, along with Marquess of Macduff. Despite the 18-year age gap, the couple lived happily at Mar Lodge, a specially built sporting lodge in Aberdeenshire, Scotland. On 16th of June 1890, Louise gave birth to a stillborn son called Alistair. A year later, Louise gave birth to their 2nd child, Alexandra, and 2 years later, on 3rd of April 1893, their final child, Maud. By 1900, it had become clear that the couple wouldn't produce a son, leaving them no descendants to inherit the dukedom. So, on 24th April 1900, Queen Victoria signed letters patent creating a second dukedom of Fife and earldom of Macduff in the peerage of the United Kingdom. The new dukedom was almost identical to the original. However, it included a special clause that meant the title would pass on to the duke's eldest daughter before being passed down to their male descendants. A year later, Queen Victoria sadly passed away, and Louise's father succeeded her as King Edward VII. On 9th November 1905, Louise was bestowed the title of Princess Royal, a title that is given to the eldest daughter of the sovereign. Along with this, her two daughters were also created princesses. In December 1911, Louise, Alexander and their daughters were travelling to Egypt when their boat, SS Delhi, was hit by a storm and ran aground just off the coast of Morocco. The family managed to escape into a lifeboat, which is thought to have also sank. The family managed to survive to sea and embarked on a long walk in the rain to Cape Spartel Lighthouse. By the time they made it to Egypt, Alexander had fallen ill with pleurisy and died in Aswan on 29th of January 1912. Louise was naturally devastated by his passing and began living a reclusive lifestyle. On a few occasions she accompanied her mother and sister Victoria on public outings. In October 1929, Louise suffered a gastric hemorrhage while staying at Mar Lodge. She was moved down to London to recover at her home in Portman Square. It was here that she died in her sleep on 4th of January 1931, with her daughters by her side. She was aged 63. Her body was initially placed in the royal vault at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, before being moved to her private chapel at Mar Lodge. Mary, Princess Royal and Countess of Harewood. Born during the reign of her great-grandmother, Mary of York passed through a number of titles as her father rose in rank. Then she married, and her husband rose in rank. And finally her father gave her the title reserved only for the first daughter of the monarch, Princess Royal, a year after the death of her Aunt Louise, Princess Royal. The only daughter of King George V and Queen Mary, Mary was painfully shy, especially as a youngster. She grew up somewhat secluded and was educated at home. World War I brought an increased isolation for her that she broke herself out of, first by starting her own charitable drive to support the soldiers and sailors, and then by becoming a nurse. At heart, Mary was a horse-mad country girl, like the niece who so much resembles her, Queen Elizabeth II. She married the much older Henry Lascelles, who later inherited the earldom of Harewood, and became the mother of two sons, whose extramarital behaviour would later scandalise the royal family. Mary herself never attracted unsavoury attention. She was, however, distressed by the abdication and practical banishment of her favourite brother, King Edward VIII, later the Duke of Windsor. It is even rumoured that she pled illness to avoid attending niece Elizabeth's wedding, because he was not invited. In addition to becoming an expert on cattle breeding, Mary Princess Royal undertook duties on behalf of the Crown throughout her life. In all, she lived during the reigns of 6 monarchs: her great-grandmother, her grandfather, her father, 2 of her brothers, and her niece. She undertook her last official duty representing the Queen at the funeral of her cousin, Queen Louise of Sweden, just a few weeks before her unexpected death. She was not quite 68 when she suffered a fatal heart attack while taking a walk with her eldest son and his sons. Anne, Princess Royal. Anne Elizabeth. Alice Louise was born at Clarence House in London, England on August 15, 1950. She is the second child of 4 children and the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom and Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. At the time of Anne's birth, her mother was Princess Elizabeth, Duchess of Edinburgh, and the sovereign was her grandfather, King George VI. The children of a daughter of a British sovereign would not usually have been accorded the style Royal Highness or the titles Prince, Princess, as in the case of Anne's own children. However, on October 22, 1948, Anne's grandfather, King George VI, issued letters patent, allowing the children of his eldest daughter and heiress presumptive to use the style and title of a royal prince or princess. Therefore, Anne was Her Royal Highness Princess Anne of Edinburgh at birth. King George VI died on February 6, 1952, and his elder daughter, Princess Elizabeth, became Queen. Upon her mother's accession to the throne, Anne was styled Her Royal Highness the Princess Anne. Anne was too young to attend her mother's coronation, but she did make an appearance on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. From a young age, Princess Anne was passionate about riding, and she soon became an excellent equestrienne. In 1971, Anne won the European Eventing Championship and was voted the BBC Sports Personality of the Year. For more than 5 years, Anne competed with the British eventing team, winning a silver medal in both individual and team disciplines in the 1975 European Eventing Championship. In the 1976 Montreal Summer Olympics, Anne competed as a member of the British equestrian team. Anne's love of riding led her to meet her first husband, Mark Phillips, also a member of the British equestrian team, and the winner of a gold medal in the Team 3-day event in the 1972 Munich Summer Olympics, and a silver medal in the Team 3-day event in the 1988 Seoul Summer Olympics. Anne and Mark's engagement was announced on May 29, 1973, and they were married in Westminster Abbey in London, England on November 14, 1973. It is believed that Queen Elizabeth offered Mark a peerage upon his marriage, which was declined. The Queen purchased the Gatcombe Park estate in Gloucestershire, England, for Princess Anne upon her marriage. In 1989, Princess Anne and Mark Phillips separated, and their divorce was final on April 23, 1992. On March 20, 1974, an unsuccessful attempt was made to kidnap Anne, as she and her husband were being driven along the Pall Mall on their way back to Buckingham Palace after a charity film show. Anne was not hurt, but several people were shot and injured, including Anne's personal protection officer and her chauffeur. On June 13, 1987, Queen Elizabeth granted her daughter the style Princess Royal. On December 12, 1992, Anne married Commander, now Vice Admiral, Timothy Lawrence, a Royal Navy officer, in a private Church of Scotland ceremony at Crathie Kirk in Ballater, Scotland, where the royal family worships when they stay at nearby Balmoral Castle. Anne was married in the Church of Scotland because it allowed the remarriage of divorced people. She had met her second husband when he served as an equerry to Queen Elizabeth II. Like her first husband, Anne's second husband did not receive a peerage.